What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. Bang! The Giants just made a splash blockbuster signing in free agency this morning, and we are here to give you guys our immediate reaction to that signing, which is safety Jevon Holland, formerly of the Miami Dolphins. The Giants just signed him to a massive 3-year, $45.3 million deal, paying him over $15 million per season. And this is an exciting move to fill a major position of need for the New York Giants. We knew that they needed to upgrade at safety. Holland was the number 3 overall free agent in this year's market, according to Pro Football Focus. By far and away the best safety available on the market. Giants saw him, they said, let's go get him, and they went ahead and they paid him some big time money. 1 year after letting Xavier McKinney walk away in free agency, though. So we will talk about that and kind of discuss what this means for the team and, how Joe Schoen has kind of learned to course correct here after a bad 2024 free agency period. And we will obviously go ahead and break down Jevon Holland, the pros, the cons, injury history, everything in between, and give you guys our objective analysis. But I'll say, before I hand it off to Alex, I do lean positive on this deal. I'm a little bit confused why this deal was made a year after letting McKinney walk, but again, feel like it's some sort of a course correction, learning from the mistakes kind of thing. But overall, this is exciting. The Giants got one of the best safeties in the NFL with this signing, and they absolutely upgraded their defense tenfold over the last 2 days. I mean, signing, of course, we discussed Paulson and Debo yesterday. We're going to discuss Jevon Holland right now, but they also signed a pretty interesting pass rusher last night, Alex, which we didn't discuss, which was Chauncey Golston. He's a really good rotational rusher, but he has some ability to move onto the interior as well, so a boost at 2 positions. Wanted to just mention that before we really dive into Jevon Holland, in case Giants fans were unfamiliar. Formerly of the Dallas Cowboys, Chauncey Golston. So, interesting player there, but Alex, let's waste no more time. How are you feeling about the New York Giants landing Jevon Holland in free agency?
Feeling pretty good about that signing. Obviously, this is a good football player, and the Giants need a lot more good football players and leaders and veterans in that secondary. Holland and Paulson Adebo bring a lot of experience, some leadership, and obviously, a jolt of energy, a jolt of production into a unit that's super, super young. And I like the fact these guys are really young. Holland is only 25 years old. Adebo is only 25 years old. So this is one of the youngest secondaries in the sport. And I think this is kind of what Joe Schoen wanted to do. Like this year, with all the money that they prepared to spend, I think obviously they hoped that they were way further along. They had a lot more figured out. But this spending spree was always going to happen now. It was always supposed to, formulate in a way that like they had really strong drafts, had past acquisitions that were really strong, and they had a lot of money this year and were able to spend a lot to upgrade the roster. So, offense really hasn't been touched yet aside from Darius Slayton and James Hudson. Hudson got a $12 million deal with $4 million in incentives. So I'm not a big fan of Hudson, but it's depth, and I'm fine with, we obviously needed a swing tackle, could no longer rely on Josh Azidu. So I have no qualms with adding a piece like that as a swing tackle. Maybe paid a little bit too much, but it's whatever at the end of the day, not that much money. So when it comes to Holland, though, you kind of mentioned it, correcting past mistakes. One of the things that we asked Joe to do last offseason was learn from his mistakes, figure out what he did wrong and correct them. And unfortunately, he didn't do that last year. This year, it seems like he might be. He watched Xavier McKinney walk. They desperately needed a leader in that secondary, needed someone to help guys like Deonte Banks lead them and really just hold things down and demand a standard, really. And I think Holland does do that. And whether or not Shane Bowen survives this year, Holland is a piece that you can utilize pretty versatile in different schemes. So I do believe that he can help you down the road, whether or not Bowen is here or not. So that definitely is good for the Giants, just good football players, whether or not the current regime sticks or they end up flopping, whatever. Whoever is the GM head coach in the future will get a good football player in Holland to work with. So that is definitely a benefit. I think they're spending a lot on defense. I was kind of surprised, actually. Like, that was a move I did not see coming. $15 million per season, that's a lot of money for a safety. But, however, he is a good football player. This past season wasn't his best, but he's been a very good run stopper and coverage safety for a very long time with Miami. So, this is a player that immediately upgrades your secondary along with the Debo. The Giants have a much different look to their secondary now than they did just like 3 days ago. So, big difference. Obviously, Chauncey Golston, a really nice addition to the pass rush as well, with Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns. They needed another guy like that, and a healthy one at that. So, it does seem like Azeez Ojulari will be departing in free agency. And the defense on paper looks solid, right? The defense on paper looks solid. The depth, there's concerns, but the starters, there's solid starters, and I think they still have the draft to reinforce the depth at certain spots if need be. The offense is the big question mark, and we'll dive into that in a second.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here, though, because you said a lot of great things there about Jevon Holland. I want to make sure that I got a chance to comment on them. One of them being he's got that ability to still be a building block for the Giants, even if they move on from this current regime. If this season goes, haywire and they make firings at the end of the year and they bring in a new defensive coordinator, the thing that I love about Jevon Holland is he really does have scheme versatility. And I think that he's a player who not only has scheme versatility, but versatility on the field, which gives him that scheme versatility. He can adapt to whichever scheme and defensive system you throw him in because he can line up all over the defense, Alex. I think one of the things that I really like about this signing is the fact that the Giants have now gotten better at several positions because they signed one player. And what I mean by that is Jevon Holland can line up in the box, he can line up in the slot, and he can line up at free safety. In 2024, he had 235 snaps in the box, 142 in the slot, and 434 at free safety. And in 2023, the best season of his career, similar numbers. He had 211 snaps in the box, 121 in the slot, and 362 at free safety. So the guy lines up all over the place. He'll probably play primarily free safety for the Giants. I think this signals that Tyler Nubin is going to play more in the box. The Giants do have a good nickel cornerback in Drew Phillips, but again, because Jevon Holland is such a versatile player, means he can be around long term regardless of who the defensive coordinator is, but it also means he can supplement any deficiencies that the Giants have at several positions of need in the secondary. The Giants have a young, inexperienced, and shaky secondary, even still with the two signings that they made because of their lack of depth. So if there are injuries across the unit, Jevon Holland can easily slide over into some of those positions and make plays and move around the defense. And I also think that opens up a lot for Shane Bowen. Shane Bowen's defense, Alex, was very predictable last year. He has the ability to now disguise a lot of coverages because he's got a very versatile safety who can move all over the place with Jevon Holland, and Tyler Nubin has that trait as well, to be versatile and move all over the place. And so does Drew Phillips. So the Giants are really placing an emphasis on versatility in the secondary, which should hopefully allow Bowen to be a little bit more creative in his calls here and run more disguised coverages that can hopefully trick opposing quarterbacks. The Giants really struggled to get interceptions last year. They had, I think, the fewest in the NFL in terms of forced interceptions throughout the season, at least for the majority of the year. I know they had a few down the stretch, so maybe that number changed, but generally speaking, they really struggled to get their hands on the ball and force any interceptions. However, now that they have a guy like Jevon Holland who can disguise their coverages for them, and they brought in Paulson Adebo, they have the ability to force some more turnovers, which is crucial. That's what made the New York Giants a good team in 2022. That's one of the ways that they went to the playoffs in that season. They had a good defense that was forcing a lot of turnovers, and they did that in 2023 as well under Wink Martindale. And the last point that I want to make before I hand it off to you again, Alex, the Giants are placing a very clear emphasis on defensive backs who can get their hands on the football. They want ball winners. They want guys who take the ball away from the opposing offense. So I'm not only talking about Jevon Holland's ability to disguise coverages and create, turnover-worthy plays for the defense, but the guy forces a lot of fumbles, in fact, and he gets his hand on the football a good amount in terms of batting passes, creating interceptions for other, and a few interceptions in his career, but I really like the ability that he has to strip the ball out of opposing running backs and wide receivers, because he has quite a few peanut punch plays on his film that are really impressive. So that's one plus, combined with the fact that Paulson Adebo is kind of a ball hawk from the cornerback position. That guy has excellent ball skills. As we said yesterday, over the last two seasons, nobody has more forced incompletions in the NFL from the cornerback position than Paulson Adebo, and he missed 10 games in that stretch. So that's two signings in the secondary that the Giants have made, Alex, that place a heavy emphasis on ball skills, getting your head turned and getting your hands on the football, which is so crucial for a secondary that really struggled in that regard, led up a lot of contested catches and failed to force turnovers and create interceptions throughout the season. What's your take on that, Alex? I think that's my biggest takeaway from the signing, and that's the aspect of the signing that I'm most excited about. This helps the New York Giants create a lot more turnovers.
Well, God knows we need more of those because last year it was hard to get turnovers, and the Giants, the offense was turning it over so much that the defense was being put in a really disadvantageous position. I think that, listen, a secondary if you have a good pass rush, it's supposed to help your secondary. But if you have a great secondary, it's supposed to help your pass rush. If you have both of those things that are good, they can play off each other, and I think you can find a good balance on defense. So what I hope from Shane Bowen is that the scheme is a lot more flexible, and he doesn't try to pigeonhole players into like positions that they really are struggling in. Like, he adapts to the strengths of his talent. And I think that, honestly, they need a voice in there that's going to help do that. And I think Holland is a voice that can talk to Bowen, talk to the coaching staff, and say, hey, I don't think this is working. That he has the experience, he has the success, he knows what that looks like, that I think he can step in and say, I think that we're doing something wrong. I think we need to change something in the secondary. There was just too much youth back there last year. They had no one in there that could go to the coaching staff and say, this is not working. Instead, it was Deontay Banks, like, showing lack of effort or, like, speaking out on the sidelines. They just didn't have that guy that could really communicate. And I think that Holland will be able to help with that, and Adebo as well. So that communication, that synergy has to be there between them and the coaching staff to make any changes and be flexible and fluid. So I do like that about it. We're hearing, obviously, on the offensive side, Will Fries just signed with the Vikings on a massive $88 million deal, almost $18 million per season. The Giants were involved. So if that's the price tag the Giants are looking at, maybe slightly below, I mean, it's not going to be that much. But
no, it's not. Paul Schwartz just reported that the Giants think the right guard market is way too high right now, and they're waiting for it to thin out.
Okay, so if they think the right guard market is too high, that means we're probably, Tevin Jenkins probably gets priced out of their realm too then. They're probably looking for stopgaps. Jenkins could be, but he's not really a right guard. He's more of a left guard. He does have experience at both. Well, I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I want to test.
Technically, he was more of a right guard because he started at right tackle, moved to right guard, and then this past season he had to play left guard for the Bears because of injuries. So I actually view him as more of a right guard. But yeah, the right guard market is kind of a mess right now, and you're absolutely.
I would rather go. So I know the Giants are in the streak of like going for younger players to fill positions, but at right guard specifically, I don't hate going for like a 1 year or even a 2 year veteran like a Kevin Zeitler. If I don't know how much he'll earn because he's a little bit older, but I don't hate like having a cemented veteran presence at right guard. Because you need someone to help John Michael Schmitz, man. You can't lean on a guy with potential. You know what I mean? You can't lean I love Illuminor, but he needs help, man. Like, I wouldn't hate a vet there to really lock it down, like really be that like a rock. So I don't know the cost of that for a guy like Zeitler, but I wouldn't hate bringing him back to the Giants.
I feel you on that, and I get what you're saying, but I think this emphasis on youth is really important for the Giants, and they should maintain it, especially on the offensive line. Although I do understand where you're coming from. I think, bringing in a veteran guard.
I think they're going to draft someone,
to add some stability is important. Yeah, that's the thing, though, because before we started recording, we were talking about this is a really strong draft class. It's not necessarily top-heavy, but there's a lot of starters through rounds 2, 3, 4 that you might be able to find in this year's draft class. I don't know how many you're going to find at the guard position, though. That seems to be, the offensive line in general seems to be one of the weak points of this draft class, though there are a lot of strong points elsewhere. So, I do think that they take a shot on a guard in the middle rounds. I still do like Tevin Jenkins, though, Alex. I think he is the youngest good guard that's available right now. He's only 27, and he just turned 27 last month. So he's a pretty young player. I'm going to keep pounding the table for Tevin Jenkins and hoping that his value and price tag continues to fall down a little bit so that the New York Giants can sign him. But I want to pitch an alternative solution here to you, Alex, and get your take on this. So like you've mentioned, this right guard market, very thin. Maybe the New York Giants go ahead and they bring in a veteran. But what about this? Could the Giants potentially pivot to the tackle market? Sign a right tackle and move Jermaine Illuminor into right guard. We know Illuminor played right tackle for the Giants last year, but prior to that, he played some tackle for the Raiders. He also played a lot of guard for the Raiders, and he's been pretty good at both of those positions. Do you think that's an avenue that the New York Giants could explore? And then as a bonus question, where does Evan Neal factor into all of this?
Evan Neal to me is a complete prayer. I know people keep saying Evan Neal. Guys, he's never played guard in the NFL, and he hasn't even started training there yet. You know what I mean? Are we really going to put our chips in that basket? At the very least, or very most to me, he's a backup. He is a depth piece. That is Evan Neal. That is it. Greg Van Roten is a better guard than Evan Neal. Might as well bring him back for a minimum contract. You know what I mean? That's how I kind of see it. I think that my preference, draft a vet. Like, I know they're going younger, but like sometimes having a vet is a good thing. Like, I think having a cemented solid vet on like a 1 or 2 year deal, a little bit older, a little bit cheaper, is fine. And then let Carmen Priscilla draft, or at least target someone in the mid rounds if the draft falls this way, and maybe it's naturally BPA. But like, if he is there and it's BPA or whatever their strategy is going to be in the draft, I would like this guy. Like, I think this guy has a lot of potential. Carmen Priscilla took over an offensive line last year that over the first 6 games of the year looked a lot better before Andrew Thomas went down, and then things just started to just fall apart at the seams. I think Brasillo has earned the opportunity to be able to target a guy in the draft and be like, this is a guy I can work with and I think could be great, right? So I would love for him to target somebody like that, and then have him develop that player, because all we've seen is him trying to fix past mistakes, right? Neil, Azidu, JMS, like all these different things. All these players that haven't really gotten there yet, or maybe never will. Marcus McKethan's not even on the roster anymore. So, I think that the Giants have an opportunity here to like say to Priscilla, well, you did a lot of good stuff. I mean, you got the best out of Greg Van Roten for 2 years. You got the best out of Jermaine Illuminor. You developed him. Like, see if there's a guy in this draft that you like, and we'll try to snag him if we have the opportunity. I think that would be a good option for them. And pair that with a veteran signing who could be like kind of like a mentor ahead of him. Someone that they could watch and learn from. Along with the other veterans on the roster already on the offensive line, like AT, Runyon, and Illuminor. So, I do think that they can structure this so they have a lot more strength behind the offensive line. The Giants' offense will only go as far as the OL takes them. It's always the case. You know what I mean? Obviously, the quarterback's super important, but their run game is predicated on the OL staying competent, and the passing game even more so. So they need to invest heavily in making sure that offensive line is reinforced at every single place. So I don't hate the idea of a vet at right guard and then a rookie to learn and assume that role after that veteran's contract expires after a year or two. I think that's not a bad move to consider.
No, it's not a bad move to consider. And like I always love to say, there's so many different ways to slice an apple. So one way or another, the New York Giants are going to try and find some sort of a solution here on the offensive line and plug in this right guard spot. Obviously, they made that signing yesterday for Hudson III, or whoever his name is. He is basically a swing tackle depth piece. I really hope that guy isn't starting games for the New York Giants in 2025, but I can't fully remember his name, so I don't want to talk too much about him. But he's not a great player. He's a depth piece that the New York Giants signed. They still need to add a starter on the offensive line, and Joe Shea made it clear at the Combine that he would do that. So we'll ultimately see who that player ends up being. Maybe it's Mekhi Becton. Maybe they steal from the Eagles. He's still available in free agency, which I am actually quite a bit surprised about. Maybe there are some concerns with only one season of solid production. So we'll see who the Giants sign at guard. But, closing thoughts here on the Jevon Holland signing, Alex. The New York Giants are a better football team because of the signing. They signed an absolute impact player. Their defense is majorly upgraded by this move. So overwhelmingly positive move here from the New York Giants. I do feel good about it. I will also just throw out, though, a couple of notes on Jevon Holland. First of all, he has the highest coverage grade among all safeties over the last 3 seasons, according to Pro Football Focus. So you know that when you're throwing into his coverage, you're going to have a tough time, which is huge for the Giants, considering how bad their coverage was at times last year. But he also does have a little bit of an injury history. He missed 4 games in 2023 with 2 MCL sprains. He sprained both of his knees that season. However, it only kept him out for those 4 games in 2023. In 2024, he did not have any knee injuries once again, so this is not a repeat injury or something that lingered. He only missed 2 games last year with a broken hand, and he played through quite a bit of hand pain recovering from that broken hand. So he's a tough player, excellent leader, ball winner, great in coverage, all of those things. So the New York Giants defense is a lot better. And we will now just be waiting with bated breath for the quarterback, pretty much. We'll see what the New York Giants do later on today. This will definitely not be our only upload on the channel today, because I have a feeling there's going to be a big domino to fall here later on in the day, probably in the afternoon. But the New York Giants' emphasis on defense, as my closing thought here, Alex, is very interesting. Their defense wasn't great last year, but it was the better half of the ball. I'm surprised that there hasn't been as much of an emphasis on the offensive side of the ball, considering they ranked 31st in that regard last year. However, I will also acknowledge the market for players on offense is pretty thin this year, and there was quite a bit of depth on the defensive side of the ball in free agency. So it does make sense that they are just kind of surveying the market and going to where the strengths are here. So I can commend them for that, but they do need to do something to fix this offense, and that's kind of my closing thought on this. But overall, feeling pretty good on Jevon Holland and the signing. Alex, what's your final takeaways from this deal?
I mean, listen, the Giants have a lot more work to do. So far, I like the strategy. I like the approach in terms of just signing good football players with leadership qualities. The draft is going to be interesting. Like, that's going to, I mean, we're watching the free agency thing unfold, but their offensive game plan, Anthony, has not given us any sense of what they're doing in the draft just yet. We'll see what happens with the quarterback. I know we're hearing now that Rodgers is picking between the Giants and Steelers. So who knows? You know, I think that the Giants made these big, I think the Giants were attacked this offseason aggressively because they had to try and convince a good quarterback to come here. So they made a bunch of big moves on day one and early day two in free agency because they were like, we have to make this team look attractive to a player like Rodgers. And I think that right now, if you're Rodgers, you think to yourself, all right, the defense is going to be good. They're going to give me the ball more. They're going to keep other teams off the field. And I have neighbors. You know, I got Wandale. I got a good running back, young running back in Tyrone Tracy. My offensive line looks better than it did with the Jets. And they brought back Darius Slayton. So not much change, but the quarterback is the big change in a lot of ways. So what I do think the Giants will have to do here is, yes, get the right guard. They're going to draft probably a quarterback. Or, Anthony, there is a world where they decide to go get Travis Hunter and say, hey, Raj, what our plan is here is to go and draft Travis Hunter, make him a receiver alongside neighbors, draft sign a RG, and you're going to have a really good situation to walk into. Like, that is possible. That is possible. I do still think they draft a quarterback because I do think they need to prepare for the future here. But if they're like, we're sticking and picking at 3 and they end up with Travis Hunter, I don't think they're going to be upset about that. And I think Rodgers is probably going to be like, yeah, that's pretty good receiver core if you ask me. Hunter and Neighbors is one of the best young cores in football. So I could see something like that unfolding. But I do still think they end up drafting a quarterback because I think it's in the best interest of Joe Schoen to do so.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. The only thing that I can say about the quarterback position is I think we're going to get more clarity later on today. And I think that this big splash signing for Jevon Holland indicates that they do have a plan at quarterback. And that's what I said yesterday in my solo reaction, Alex, to the Darius Slayton signing. There were some quotes from Darius Slayton last week that we discussed, or a couple weeks ago, where it seemed to indicate that he didn't want to return to the Giants. Also, further in that interview that we didn't really discuss on the channel was him saying that he won't return to the Giants unless they have a plan in place at quarterback, and he feels confident in that plan. So to me, the New York Giants must have shared their plan with Darius Slayton yesterday in order to get that deal done and re-sign him to that contract. So I do think there is some sort of a plan in the works here. Don't think they'd be spending big on a safety unless they knew they had a plan to acquire a quarterback this offseason that can win them games in 2025. So I do feel like a major domino is about to fall. Whether that's a trade for the first pick, a signing of Russell Wilson, or a signing of Aaron Rodgers, I'm not sure. But I think the Giants know that they're going to be able to get the quarterback that they want one way or another. So now it's just the waiting game. It's just about seeing who that quarterback is and when they bring him in. And of course, we're going to update you all on that right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you're new, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you listen to Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.